Alright, what's up guys? I hope you're doing well. James here from jamesforsythe.com, and as you can probably tell, I'm in a hotel room again. It's different from the usual, like normally just record in my bedroom, so the usual background stuff, nothing special. But anyways, part of the reason why this is going to go a little bit differently, we're still going to talk about central bank digital currencies, but we're now not going to be able to do a screen share because I'm having to actually record on my phone because the Wi-Fi here at the hotel is so shoddy. And this is the second time having to record it because it didn't work last time. But anyways, with that being said, we'll get right into it. It's still the same source as always. Forget the name of this specific report, but just system design and interoperability. We're going to be talking about interoperability specifically today, and this is written itself. The PDF itself is written by a group of central banks. Again, banking ones like the Bank of Canada, ECB, Bank of Japan, Swiss National Bank, Bank of England, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, and also the BIS. I know they're not a central bank, but they're also involved, right? So that being said, if I can scroll down to the actual section we're going over. Oh, and like always, the link to the actual PDF will be in the description. So if you want to see the actual source as well, it's still there. It's just that we won't actually screen share this one, so trying something new. But anyways, so interoperability is a broad term for a CBDC system, central bank digital currency system. It would encompass characteristics sufficient to achieve an easy flow of funds to and from other payment systems. So they have like 4 or 5 pages or so about interoperability in general, and it's kind of just various different ways of explaining the same thing. They just use different language, slightly different perspectives, but not really. They pretty much all basically having minimum technical standards across all characteristics, so that they can at least operate with one another, right? So say you want to transfer, like if you're an American and you have a said Fed coin, if one comes out, and then basically you'd be able to transfer value, in this case with the CBDC, to say the Eurozone, whatever, just giving you an example, right? But the thing is, unless there is a global central bank digital currency, and at that point it would probably be something like along the sides of like the IMF or something like that. It wouldn't. I don't know if they'd even call it a central bank digital currency at that point. But anyways, as these working papers are now, and how this is going, from what they've been saying, at least in the reports, is it's basically going to be, at least at least with respect to America, it would be like a 2-tiered system where you have the central bank, the Federal Reserve, kind of taking care of like the core structure and the actual currency itself, and then you'd have all the other services and such would be outsourced to intermediaries, which could be like commercial banks or payment service providers, things like that. Also other services like customer service, they'd probably outsource, stuff like that, right? So with that being said, and I quote, "For a CBDC system, sufficient interoperability to ensure an easy flow of funds between payment systems would be a core feature and would contribute to the coexistence of a CBDC within a wider payment system," and citing themselves as the group of central banks. Again, this will all be in the description if you want to actually read it yourself. So this would include a range of characteristics from accommodative technical infrastructure to common legal and regulatory frameworks and data and messaging standards. The essential foundation for interoperability would be standardization, which would allow compatibility, right? And then basically literally the next like 3 pages are saying that last couple sentences in different ways, like almost sometimes quite literally, like if you were in like high school or something and your English teacher told you to like paraphrase something, like that's essentially what it seems like. It's just paraphrase the same 3 sentences over and over again, some with examples which are kind of interesting, and we'll go over those examples themselves. But with that being said, what are some kind of options that you could think of? And also, if you guys think of other ones as well that aren't explicitly stated in the paper, one, if you want to cross-reference that, read the paper itself, like always, or just put them in the comments below. So, always open to some of the comments are kind of interesting of what people can think of, even on something that seems so niche like a central bank digital currency, or at least actually trying to understand it from, I don't know, that deep of a level. But anyways, so potential options for the infrastructure with respect to interoperability would include sharing functions. For example, same authorization and clearing providers, or using the same digital identity scheme. So that's something we talked a little bit about on past 2, maybe 3 videos, and one of those was kind of the digital identity scheme on like how they're actually going to have the authentication process and how that's going to go about, right? So that's something we have talked about a little bit before, but that even they only passed it and they only kind of discussed it, I guess, in passing. So I'm going to try to find some actual like more in-depth sources on that, and not just like a few paragraphs, so to speak. Trying to find some actual like sources and things that maybe even they cite in here. But it seems like, from at least with this one specifically, they're mostly citing themselves. So anyways, in all likely CBDC systems, designs, payments, wow, I completely screwed that one up. In all likely CBDC system designs, payments would involve multiple stages as outlined in the functions described in the previous sections. Across stages, including the initiating, authorizing, processing, and settling payments, different characteristics would be more relevant, right? And so we're talking about not only... So going over and thinking of both reports that we've done so far, right? And so we really have to understand there's like kind of a list, and I even went over in another video on like basically they had a table of the various other features that a CBDC must have, right? And so with that being said, is like, you know, each different characteristics, say like security, payment processing, things like that. I forget the exact ones off the top of my head on how they structured it, but things that kind of, whether or not it would bear interest, whose exact liability would it be? Would it be that of the central bank, or would it be that of the government? So on, to give some examples, right? And there's a cost benefit kind of analysis that needs to go on there, right? And so it's kind of like, with what given set of characteristics would be most beneficial for a specific country's situation. And that's why interoperability is such kind of a is so discussed, so to speak, and it's kind of their major pushing point, is because the different systems, each different country will have a different system to a varying degree, right? Because certain characteristics that would work for the United States might not work for the Eurozone, within kind of a range, I guess, of reason, right? There'll be some differences, maybe they'll be very similar, maybe they won't be. It just kind of depends on very specific circumstances of a specific country, right? And I guess the Eurozone wasn't the best example for that. Say like maybe it's El Salvador, or I think they're doing that Bitcoin thing off the top of my head, but it's been a while since I read that. We're gonna go with Colombia, but you get the point, right? Different countries are going to have a different kind of, they're going to have a different currency, right? Unless they do the whole one world currency thing, or what was that called? I think John Maynard Keynes called it the Bancor for, and this was back during the Bretton Woods conference, I believe. something along those lines. But yeah, without going down too much further of a rabbit hole. So what are some considerations that must be had, right? And so in a domestic context, the characteristics of a pre-existing payment system would likely play a significant role in a CBDC's interoperability, right? And so if you're thinking domestically, I mean, it's even argued in the reports that a CBDC would be auxiliary to the system we already have, or at least that's kind of the plan as of these reports, or what they talk about, so to speak. And so that could change obviously in the future, but according to these reports, that's the plan, right? And so it wouldn't really replace, and it wouldn't like replace commercial bank deposits. It would be work in tandem with, right? According to these reports. I'm just kind of really stressing that fact. And then there's also, because they also talk about with the kind of introduction of a central bank digital currency, how would that affect financial stability in general with respect to the commercial banking system? Like, would it take too much liquidity out? How would that work, right? What exactly are the incentives at play, so to speak? And so apparently I'm thinking of something completely different. So I was about to take that completely the wrong way. Also just kind of thinking out loud, which is kind of the purpose of the videos in general, to be honest. But okay, so again, bottom line for interoperability for a central bank digital currency is common standards, minimum technical standards, whatever you want to call it. I deal with minimum technical standards all the time for work, so that's probably the term I'm going to be saying the most, just because I'm used to it. So again, it would have to be a core feature of a CBDC, and it would be necessary for integrating into broader payments landscape and broader payments landscape and achieving public policy objectives, right? Because really the whole point is they have to have this thing adopted, and then it has to kind of push public policy, right? That's kind of, even though I think they say explicitly that the whole point of a central bank digital currency would be not to only implement monetary policy, but it could be one way to do so. And not even just monetary policy, fiscal policy as well, depending on how close the Treasury and the Fed want to go with this, right? Or how close they want to act together, right? And so, because one of the things that they do talk about is essentially UBI with the central bank digital currency, and that's something that was explicitly stated, not universal basic income specifically, but government transfer payments. That is like an explicit term that they do state in their reports themselves. So that's another thing, right? And so some examples of kind of these technical barriers that they talk about, again, inconsistent standards, again, and this is with respect to message formats, data elements, numbering and coding systems, security protocols, scalability, throughput capacity, and opening hours, right? That's one thing with like cross-border payments that they talk about a lot, is the opening hours of the various entities, right? I mean, somewhere in Japan is probably not going to be open at the same time as the United States. And so kind of keeping that in mind. Things like that. So options to avoid, they say using common international technical standards, again, and or application programming interfaces requiring minimal viable security standards, a different type of standards, or encouraging other systems to adopt stronger security, engaging in early and frequent communication with other systems to estimate volumes and throughput, and establishing rules for CBDC payments initiated during the closing hours of other systems, right? So kind of just establishing a base set of rules, i.e. minimum technical standards to some degree, right? And that's pretty much it. And then you also have to think about some commercial barriers and also legal ones as well, because especially if you're dealing with interoperability in the grand scheme of things is for the various systems to operate together, right? It's interoperability, right? The word itself. So you have to keep in mind that, different countries have different laws, and so like how exactly is the jurisdiction going to play with that? How exactly will, and even then it seems like it'd be on like a country by country basis. So how would that work? Would it kind of be like more of a decentralized kind of exchange in a way? Or is it all going to be on one ledger somehow, right? And that just kind of, and what would be like the different repercussions of possibilities and stuff that are, I guess, repercussions of the various possibilities that could come from that, right? So like how again, both these reports that we've gone over so far are both for they're essentially just discussion papers. I think that's actually what they explicitly call them as well, is discussion papers. So nothing's obviously set in stone. As of right now, I mean, we don't even have a central bank digital currency. This is just kind of something they are looking at and thoroughly researching, apparently. So, with that being said, and kind of, I guess, main takeaway on interoperability, again, minimum technical standards in the various characteristics or core features, whatever you want to call them, throughout the whole system, right? And that essentially that is just so various systems can work together. Not even just internationally, even if it was just domestically. So like if you wanted to convert your central bank digital currency to physical cash or to commercial bank deposits, how would those various systems operate together? Would they be one? Would they be basically part of the same system, or would they basically be like parallel systems, which is a concept I believe we talked about yesterday, last night, or maybe the night before, to where how would this central bank digital currency system operate with respect to our typical financial system that we have now, right? So I guess traditional financial system would be a better word. So like, is it going to run parallel? Or are they going to be the same in some places? Like, how is that going to work, right? So those are all things to keep in mind. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I have to say on interoperability. I mean, again, as you can probably tell from what I've been saying, it's various ways of saying minimum technical standards to some degree, right? That's pretty much it for interoperability. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one.